2. Why is woman a symptom of man? 2.1. Why is suicide the only successful act? The act as an answer of the real. The miracle of Roberto Rossellini's encounter with Ingrid Bergman, this true act of grace that stirred his creativity and caused it to take another direction, exemplifies in an almost uncanny way how a letter always arrives at its destination. The background of the story is well known. In 1947, at the height of her fame as the leading Hollywood star, Ingrid Bergman saw Rossellini's Open City and Paisan, his two neo-realist masterpieces, in a small New York theater. Deeply affected, she wrote a letter to Rossellini which attests to her transferential relationship with him.
Go! Fuck!
Even before the two of them met personally. A case of love before first sight. She was obsessed by the idea of helping Rossellini gain well-deserved international fame by putting her stardom at his disposal. So she offered herself for any role, if he had any use for a Swedish actress who spoke fluent English, some German, and only 2 words of Italian, ti amo, I love you. However, a series of accidents almost prevented her letter from reaching him. An Italian she met in America told her she could reach Rossellini by writing to Minerva Studios. Then, the studio headquarters burnt down after her letter arrived. Sifting through the ashes, they found the letter, but when the studio tried to contact Rossellini, he kept hanging up, since he was in a dispute with them at the time. When the letter finally managed to get to him, he had to have his secretary translate it from English, and then asked her who Ingrid Bergman was. Once surprised of her international fame, he quickly responded with an urgent telegram on May 8th, his birthday, that it was absolutely true that I dreamed to make a film with you. A lie pure and simple, opportunistic flattery. Or was it? What to think then of the fact that in Rossellini's most famous film, Open City from 1945, the 2 central negative characters, the lesbian Nazi and the Gestapo torturer, are named Ingrid and Bergman? In a way, Rossellini effectively had already had dreams on the Ingrid Bergman theme. What were his thoughts upon receiving a letter signed by a person whose name condensed 2 other impersonations of evil from his film? Wasn't this a kind of answer of the real to his reckless playing with the film illusion? An experience close to that of Casanova when, as if in a response to his magic prattle, nature reacted with a violent thunderstorm? Ingrid Bergman thus entered Rossellini's life with the traumatic impact of an act. Although her letter appeared as a shock, the place for her within Rossellini's symbolic space had already been carved out far in advance. How should we conceive the notion of act at work here, i.e., the act in its suicidal dimension? Today, it is already part of received wisdom, a sign of good manners, so to speak, to reject with derision the supposedly naive, commonsensical opposition of words and acts or things, an opposition upon which phrases of the type, you only talk instead of acting, not only in words, but also in deeds, and so forth, are based. Everybody now knows that we can do things with words. More than 40 years have passed since J.L. Austin wrote his standard manual on this theme. And indeed, is not the very kernel of psychoanalysis embedded in the dimension of language as speech act? Is it not confined to this dimension by the very fact that it is a talking cure, an attempt to reach and transform the real of the symptom solely by means of words, i.e., without having recourse to an immediate operation on the body via electrotherapy, pharmacotherapy, etc., we can thus determine with precision the moment when Wilhelm Reich ceased to be a psychoanalyst, when he abandoned the medium of the word and started to rely on bodily massage to release neurotic tensions. And, closer to our domain, does not Lacan, at the very moment when he elaborated his notion of the autonomous symbolic order, formulate a kind of theory of the speech act performative avant la lettre? Is not the fundamental proposition of his first seminars that intersubjective reality is composed of utterances which, by means of their very act of enunciation, make the subject what it asserts to be, utterances of the type "you are my wife, my teacher," and so forth, in other words, interpolations, utterances whereby the subject, by recognizing itself in their call, becomes what they purport it to be? And is not herein also the accent of Lacan's conception of the functional role of remembering past traumas? The point is not to arrive at the factual truth of some long-forgotten event. What is effectively at stake here is, quite literally, the recollection of the past, i.e., the way this remembrance of the past bears on the subject's present position of enunciation, how it transforms the very place from which the subject speaks is spoken. Herein lies the effect of truth intended by the psychoanalytic cure. When I draw childhood trauma out of the shadowy world of repression and integrate it with my knowledge, this radically transforms the symbolic horizon that determines my present self-understanding. After accomplishing it, I am not the same subject as before. However, it is obvious that Lacan's thesis on suicide as the only successful act doesn't enter this frame. The matrix of the act enabling us to grasp suicide as the act par excellence is definitely not that of a speech act, of a performative. Which is then this matrix? Instead of risking an immediate answer, let us return to Rossellini, since his central obsession was precisely that of a suicidal, impossible act of freedom beyond the scope of a performative.